Today, we follow Whitney Webb's trail of warnings from over the past several years and show how they weren't wild theories, but blueprints of what was to come. From Wall Street and BlackRock to the Epstein cover-up, from AI technocracy to manipulated elections, Webb's voice has been one of rare consistency. In late 2023, Whitney Webb warned that Trump's presidency would bring another engineered debt crisis. She pointed to BlackRock's role in COVID-era bailouts, long before most people understood the scale of this power grab.
The next president, who we know now will be Trump, is going to face some sort of U.S. government debt crisis. When Trump was in office last time, BlackRock designed U.S. fiscal response to COVID that they began implementing before a pandemic was even declared, and it resulted in one of the biggest wealth transfers in American history and printed more money than at any other time in U.S. history.
But Webb didn't stop there. She reminded us that Trump's first term set a dangerous precedent, promises that never matched the policy.
I just want to start off with saying that I definitely empathize with the view, just like I did in 2016 and other elections, that the Trump ticket was the lesser of two evils. But I think after the first Trump term and the precedent set by campaign rhetoric versus policy action in that first term, I've been really skeptical that that won't repeat itself.
And her biggest warning? That complacency, believing our guy has it under control, would be the trap that ensures the cycle repeats.
What I would warn against is the idea that now that the lesser of two evils has won, now is the time to sit back and just let things happen and not hold anyone's feet to the fire and not ensure accountability. Because I think that's, a recipe for disaster, frankly, when people are complacent and too trusting. Consistently, politicians abuse that.
From engineered crises to bipartisan betrayal, Webb's analysis revealed the playbook long before the next act unfolded. That same year, Webb exposed the darker side of stablecoins, showing they were never truly independent of government influence.
Stablecoins have the potential to be just as programmable and surveillable as a CBDC could be, and the Fed and the national security community, meaning the CIA, among other agencies, have been very open that stablecoins will ensure dollar hegemony.
And for Webb, the only true solution wasn't trusting these systems at all. It was building alternatives outside their control.
Change is going to come from the bottom up, not the top down, and that people need to really ensure and focus on their local communities, on local resilience, and on building out alternatives that can help us resist a lot of these technocratic agendas that seek to micromanage and control, essentially every aspect of our lives.
As the world rushes to digitize money, Webb's early warning rings louder. These tools are not freedom. They are chains. In 2024, Whitney Webb returned to one of the darkest scandals of our time, the Epstein case, and exposed how Trump's promises of truth turned into silence.
In the 2024 campaign, there was a lot of signaling, not just from Trump, but from, J.D. Vance and some of these other figures, some of Trump's children, on social media, and I believe also interviews, basically promising the release of Epstein documents if Trump were to be elected. And this is also true of things that were stated by the current FBI director and FBI deputy director. And a few months before things really exploded with Trump getting kind of feisty on his social media posts.
She explained how the illusion of reform was kept alive, not by real change, but by carefully chosen figureheads.
RFK Jr. in charge of HHS, I don't really think he's running. He's just kind of this figure that connected with Trump's base, particularly during the COVID era, and made them think reforms would come. And those reforms haven't really come, but he's kind of there to give the impression that things have changed. But the person behind him, the deputy secretary, is Jim O'Neill, who's a career affiliate of Peter Thiel, who's also the power behind J.D. Vance and, a man that made Palantir what it is. I think it's just a way of sort of masking the people that are actually running stuff.
And finally, Webb pointed out the uncomfortable truth. Any full exposure of Epstein's death would implicate Trump's own Department of Justice.
Jeffrey Epstein's death in prison happened during the first Trump administration, so anything that would be released that would suggest that something unusual happened the night that he died would come back to roost for the previous Trump Department of Justice and presumably former Attorney General William Barr.
The Epstein case was never going to be solved under Trump because exposing it meant exposing his own administration. We did a video last week on Trump calling for ABC and NBC to lose their broadcast licenses, and if you've seen the headlines online, you can see how wild the coverage has been. But this week, I want to show you some deeper context using ground news. On one side, outlets framed it as a serious constitutional issue, while others echoed Trump's complaints directly. Seeing those headlines side by side on ground news really shows just how differently narratives are being shaped depending on where you look. Ground news is a new tool I've been using to break down how stories like this are reported. You can see bias ratings, who owns the outlet, how factual their reporting is, and compare coverage across the political spectrum all in one place. They even have a feature called the blind spot feed that specifically highlights stories that are being disproportionately covered. I haven't found anything else that organizes this much information so clearly. It's clear why it's getting so much attention. Apple has even spotlighted it as App of the Day 5 times across 38 countries. If you want to start accessing the news in a way where you can see the full picture and understand why stories are reported the way they are, head to ground.news/ONLYSAVY. Through that link, you'll get 40% off unlimited access with the Vantage subscription, which is the same plan I use to do all of this. Whitney Webb also warned us about the rise of artificial intelligence, not as innovation, but as a tool of control.
AI is going to make a two-tiered society. There's going to be the top tier of people who develop and maintain AI and set and determine what its objective functions are, and then sort of a second class who, which we would assume is larger than the first class, so they don't explicitly say that, but who AI acts upon, and eventually that group will lose the ability to understand and really be able to conceive of how AI is impacting their lives, and will develop some sort of dependency on AI for things like decision making, sort of leading to this phenomena that they refer to in the book as cognitive diminishment.
But her concern wasn't just theory. She showed how the fusion of tech companies and intelligence agencies was already underway.
There needs to be like an actual public discussion on this, particularly on the fact that our out-of-control national security state in Silicon Valley have essentially been fusing over the past few decades, and what necessarily that means. Because a lot of people will say stuff, well, it's AI in the private sector, but when that private sector company has multi-million dollars conflicts of interest with the national security state, I think that should, be part of the discussion.
And when governments began outsourcing decisions to algorithms, the danger became clear. Liberty traded for math that wasn't even accurate.
When I reported on at the time, as I recall, but it's been a few years, but I do know that the algorithm per the company was under 80% accurate. I think it was somewhere in the 70s. And so that's the company, right? So if it's not independently vetted, this is sort of, company PR, at the end of the day, is that overinflated? It's quite possible. Right. And so what if the accuracy of that isn't really in the 70s, it's in the 60s or near the 50s? It's no better than a coin toss. Right. Is it really worth putting that kind of power in the hand of an algorithm that isn't necessarily going to be more efficient and accurate? But all this hype that's been generated around AI as an industry suggests that has sort of created this public perception that AI is inherently smarter than human decision makers and more efficient and more cost effective.
Her warnings foreshadowed today's reality. AI is not about efficiency. It is the foundation of a digital prison. Back in 2022, Whitney Webb raised alarms about Trump's willingness to embrace foreign influence, even praising it.
Here's the thing that really concerns me about Trump as it relates to national sovereignty. Recently, he did an interview, and he said something about Israel, about how Israel essentially, he said it, controls Congress, and how he thought that was a good thing. Okay, so regardless of how you feel about Israel, Zionism, the U.S.-Israel relationship, I do not think it's a good sign to have your nationalist politicians say a foreign power rightfully, unduly influences our national Congress.
Webb tied this pattern to other troubling policies, like Trump's pride in Operation Warp Speed.
It was not a good idea to put the military, specifically DARPA people, in charge of that, who have DARPA tends to have sort of this mad scientist view, and they have partnerships with people like Moderna, which also is partnered with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
I don't know if they support Trump, though. I think they manipulated Trump into bullying him into doing that.
But
I don't think they
support. But Trump still, to this day, supports that operation.
And even Trump's own White House was not safe. Webb reminded us of foreign surveillance devices discovered yet ignored.
I mean, even the Trump White House, the FBI found stingray devices that were Israel's government spying on the Trump White House. Nothing was done. And there's a lot of things going back. Robert Maxwell sold bugged software on behalf of Israel to our nuke facilities at Sandia Los Alamos lab. Henry Kissinger told him who to pay off. Nothing happened to Henry Kissinger. John Tower was the guy he paid off, former head of the Senate Armed Services Committee, opened the door for Maxwell to sell this bug software. And then they take our nuclear secrets and then they sell it on to China. So that is a problem for me. I mean, you say that's one example, but I think that is a pretty significant example. And personally, I would challenge Trump on that when it comes to the America First stuff. But at the same time, when you're talking about the Republican Party,
1 out of 20 institutions you just mentioned.
That's fine, but I think in terms of undermining the claim of America First, I think that is something that he definitely needs to address.
The story Webb told was one of compromised sovereignty, a nationalist leader whose words and policies betrayed the very independence he claimed to protect. From BlackRock's financial engineering to the surveillance hidden inside digital money, to Epstein's silencing, to AI technocracy, and even foreign control of Congress, Whitney Webb warned us. Again and again, her insights foreshadowed what we live through today. The establishment called her a conspiracy theorist, but history keeps proving her right.